life and my life is like a lamp to a world that is searching for the path. We have become the example of Christ, and we are now the light of the world. Can the world see the radiance of Christ in you?
Evangelism does not happen by accident. Discipleship does not happen by accident. If we're going to fulfill our God-given mission as a church, we need to be intentional and reach out and share and introduce people to Jesus Christ.
Africa is an amazing continent with 50% of its population under the age of 18. If we impact the children, we would have impacted the future of the church and the future of our world.
Each one of us has something to bring to the table. Are you willing to release your resources? Surrendering your material goods or your gifts and talents or your time or your heart? What are you going to do?
If we're going to plant the 300 churches, if we're going to reach out to 1 million people through evangelism, if we're going to disciple 100,000 in this nation, and if we are going to have an impact with the poor, with the needy, with children, with all the others who are part of our communities around us, it's not going to happen unless you have committed yourself to the purposes of God and you have been faithful to live by those purposes. For those who are visiting with us, we have been studying or reflecting in Scripture on the question of how do we become good stewards of what God has put in our hands. And we're looking at 8 biblical principles for good stewardship. And I have challenged you that if you have the courage and the commitment to follow through on these principles, I kid you not, within a year, within 5 years, you will see a drastic change in your financial state if you're faithful to keep the principles. So here are the 4 that we've studied so far. Just very quickly remind us. The first one was that God is the giver of wealth. God is not against wealth. He's not against money. He's not against riches. He is the creator, the giver of wealth, who gives us the ability to create wealth. But if you want God to bless you with wealth, then the first thing He says of you is that you are to set aside a tithe or a tenth of all that He puts into your hands. And we said in the first week, you do not rob the hand that is trying to bless you, but instead you be generous towards God and He will be generous towards you. Let me say this again. If you have a problem tithing, it is not a financial problem, it is a spiritual problem. So that's the first principle. The second principle is that without a vision, a people perish. If you don't know where you're going financially, if you're not clear on the goals, if you don't know what you're asking God for, without a vision, a people perish. You need to sit down and prayerfully set down on paper in your mind what your financial goals are. And I shared with you the 5 goals that I have prayed about at a personal level and how God has been answering them so that some of them have been ticked off. One of them was, Lord, please help me own my home. And I do today because God heard my prayer and He made it possible for me to do that. So that's the second principle. Third principle is that you need to plan and think through where you're going and how you're going to get there. You do not begin building something without having sat down and put together a financial plan so that you can assure that you will complete what you have begun. Otherwise, men will look at you and laugh at you and say, this fool began to build and he could not finish. Indeed, the Bible says in Proverbs 21 and verse 5, plan carefully and you will have plenty. But if you act too quickly, impulsively, you will never have enough. And we call that financial plan a budget. And we talked about what a budget looks like. And I clearly said, if you're living on more than 60% of your take-home salary, you're living beyond your means. You are squarely on the road to poverty if you're living on more than 60%. And then last week, we're looking at principle number 4. And it was a principle of Ecclesiastes chapter 11 and verse 2. It says, invest in 7 ventures, yes, even 8, for you do not know what disaster may fall upon the land. And the lesson we drew out of that is, diversify your investments, and you need to ensure that you have 7 or 8 income streams building into your wealth. Your salary is not enough or it. And so you have to ask the question that we asked last week from the book of Exodus. What is that in your hands? Because like Moses, when you give to God that dead stick that cannot do anything on its own, it turns into a living, powerful organism. And we have dreams, and we have talents, and we have gifts, and we have skills that are dead in our hands. And we can give them to God, and He will use them to bless us with. This is principle number 5. It's a very easy principle. And it is simply and purely this. Principle number 5 is say no to debt. The Bible says 2 things about debt. And the first of those is Romans chapter 13 and verse 8. Romans 13 verse 8. It says this, owe nothing to anyone except for your obligation to love them. The only debt I should have is that I have made a commitment to love you, and I will fulfill that commitment. But in terms of money and material possessions, owe nothing to anyone. Do not carry debt. Now, the Bible doesn't forbid debt. And there are seasons and times when, circumstances work out such that we do fall into debt. But our intended objective should always be to get out of debt as quickly as possible and to live debt-free. The second thing that the Bible says about debt, and probably it is because of this second thing that the first one is so important, is Proverbs chapter 2 and verse 7. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. When you owe someone else money, you become their slave. You serve them, they have power over you, they dictate the terms, and at their beck and call, they can yank the chain, and you have to comply. Let me explain why you become a slave when you owe somebody else money. Say you go to the bank and you want to borrow 7 million shillings, okay? to go and buy a flat so that you can live in it, okay, a small flat, 7 million shillings, you commit to pay it back in 10 years. And the interest here in Kenya, as you know, is 14.5% to take a mortgage like that. Throw in another percent because you have to insure the property, there are taxes, and there are other things that you need to pay for, like stamp duty and such. You borrow 7 million shillings at 15%. The repayment is going to be 115,000 shillings per month to pay that back. But because you borrowed the money from the bank, by the time you pay it all back, you would have paid a total of 14 million shillings. In other words, you borrowed 7 million, you pay back 14 million. And in that 10 years, you are the slave of the bank. If you decide to take 15 years, then you pay back a total of 18 million shillings. If you take 20 years on that mortgage of 7 million, you will eventually end up paying 23 million shillings, almost 3 times what you borrowed, and for 20 years, you will be a slave of the bank. I took a loan on my home because we had built with what we had. We moved in when the house structure had no doors and no windows, and over the months, over a period of about 5 years, we put a door each month and a window, and eventually the home was up, but we didn't have enough to complete it properly. So I went along to the bank and I gave, the property as a security to the bank and borrowed a ton of money from the bank so that I could finish the home and pay back the bank. When I went, the interest on the home, on the mortgage, was 11.75%, which of course here in Kenya, particularly, about 10 years ago, 7 years ago, was a very good mortgage interest, 11.75%. But in this volatile, unstable economy, after about 3 or 4 years, it went up to 14%. And after another 2 or 3 years, it went up to 16%. And then I believe it was around 2012, 2013, everything went haywire, and my interest on my loan, my mortgage, went up to 24% repayment. It was so high that the bank called those of us with a mortgage in, and it told us that we have mercy, we feel sorry on you, and we are asking that you pay the interest only and not the principal, because it's become too much. And so for over a year, I paid interest on my loan, on my mortgage. It was like running on the same spot. A lot of activity, a lot of energy, big tons of money that I was paying in, but moving nowhere. At the end of that year, my debt was the same as a year ago, even though I had handed in tons of money to the bank. It was at that time that I decided, what the Bible says, that when you borrow, you are a slave of the bank or whoever you borrow from. I could see it. I prayed for relief from the Lord, so that I could get over my debt. I made a commitment to pay back the mortgage as soon as I could, to actually speed up so that I could pay it back, because I was afraid if I defaulted for any reason at 24% interest, bad things begin to happen. Nasty, scary things begin to happen when you default. And then fourthly, I understood that even though the bank always sends me those cheap electronic birthday cards for my birthday, and they always have pretty teller girls who smile at me and they tell me I'm a prestige customer and they call me by my first name and they ask me about my health as though we're intimate friends. They are not my friends. They're bleeding me dry and they love my debt and they hope I won't pay it back soon. Because the longer I take to repay my debt, the more money they can make on me, because the borrower is the slave of the lender. And if you want to create wealth, if you want to find financial freedom, then you need to learn to live debt-free and stop your money from working for somebody else and instead work for you. But as long as you are in debt, your money is working for somebody else and making them rich and keeping you poor. Do not borrow money. Avoid debt like the plague. Debt is a burden on your back and never goes away until it is paid back in full. It gives you sleepless nights and headaches and arguments in your marriage, conflicts with your spouse. I have a friend who told me 80% of his salary goes towards debt repayment. And I could immediately tell you he's having problems in his marriage, his kids probably aren't in school consistently. 80% goes towards debt repayment. That's what debt does for you. It gives you stress, shame when you can't pay back, conflict with your creditors. Debt has an emotional price that you pay on it. You can borrow money from your brother and he's not charging you interest. But when you don't pay back what you promised, then it has an emotional toll on your relationship with your brother. Debt eats your tomorrow today, and it puts you on the road towards poverty. Debt is like an escalator that is going down instead of going up towards wealth. And as long as you ride the down escalator, you get further and further away from the goals that you have to create wealth. So why does anybody take debt on? It's because of the promise of instant gratification. I can have it now. I don't have to wait. I can charge it to my credit card. It's because the world tells me I can get anything I want now, and after all, I deserve it. Look at the big billboards that we have all over Nairobi, and they encourage you to get a credit card or to go and buy on debt, to get a loan, to buy a house through a mortgage because you deserve it. It's because the banks want me to be in debt so that they can make as much as possible from me and milk me dry. It's because I'm driven by envy. So when I see that my friends are living rich, they have new cars, they have a posh lifestyle, I want to have the same, even if I have to go into debt. It's because the world tells me that you can never create wealth if you do not take on debt. And it's a lie. And it's because I'm foolish and sometimes I buy things even when I know I cannot afford them. But can you really live without debt? I'd like to suggest to you that in many instances you can. Even when it comes to owning a home, there is a way. And I want to talk about that next time, okay? How you can own a home without taking on major debt. How you can buy a car without taking on major debt. Let me teach you what is called the 23-10 car loan policy, okay? And for those of you who are young, you don't yet have a car, you're thinking about getting a car is not a good asset. Because once you get a car, it eats you every month. it eats you on fuel, it eats you on maintenance, it eats you on insurance, it eats you on breakdowns and such, and it's not a good asset. But if you feel that you must get a car, let me tell you how you buy a car without going into serious debt, okay? It's called the 23-10 principle. The first thing is you do not go to buy a car with 100% loan. You must first save up 20% of the cost of the car so that you can pay cash. The saving up helps you to learn the discipline of setting aside so that when you do take a loan, you already have organized your finances to set aside and repay. So first build up the 20% that you need. Number two, do not take a car loan for more than 3 years. Pay it down as quickly as possible, 3 years. And number three is once you have bought the car, keep it for 10 years. So let's say you want to buy your first ever car. Go buy a Vitz. Economical, it doesn't cost much to maintain. Look after it, baby it, watch over it, because it needs to last you 10 years. Okay? You go pay down 20%, and then you can borrow the 80%. The 80% on a 3-year loan at 14.5% interest will cost you about 20,000 shillings a month. And so for 3 years, you pay down your debt until it is complete and you no longer have a loan. 3 years. But for the next 7 years, because you're going to keep the car for 10 years, for the next 7 years, you continue paying 20,000 into an account that is for a car. And for 7 years, you pay 20,000 a month as though you still had a loan. After 7 years, you would have saved up about 1.7 million shillings from 20,000. You take the mukebe of whatever is left of the Vitz and you go and sell it, okay? 100,000. You add that to the account. And because the money is in an interest-bearing, say a fixed deposit account, you have cumulative interest on that account, you get another million from the interest. You now have the equivalent of about 2.5 to 3 million shillings to go and buy your second car without needing to take a loan. And you don't, the first one, the Vitz, you don't go and buy from the showroom because that's a waste of money, okay? Especially on your first car. You don't even go and buy a Mitumba car, you know, the ones from Japan. You go and look for somebody who has been using this car for the last 4 years on Kenyan roads. Hopefully you will find an old Gashosho who used to drive it just to the petrol station and back, and it's in good condition. But now that you have almost 3 million shillings for your next car, you can go and get a Mitumba car. Any car you buy, you keep for 10 years. And so you go on paying 20,000 per month as though you are still paying down the Vitz. For the next 10 years, by the time you're done, you have the equivalent of almost 5 million shillings for your next car. Now you can go to the showroom and you can get the car you dreamt of. Never ever needing to take a loan except for the first small little car that you ever bought. If on your second or your third car you're having to take a loan, that's poor stewardship. You can live without debt. Recently, the papers have been warning us about the rate at which Kenyans are taking on credit cards. And you know, guys, it's particularly the young and the up-and-coming wealthy, the new middle class, who are taking these credit cards. But let me tell you guys, credit cards are dangerous. I'm not talking about debit cards. Debit cards are different. Credit cards are dangerous. And the banks want you to take them on. They offer you credit cards. I was surprised not too long ago when one of the banks that I bank with sent me a credit card I had not applied for, and they told me, call this number and your credit card will automatically be activated. And I hadn't even applied for it. Because I kid you not, guys, when the banks are trying to create money, the bank managers are prayer warriors. There is a bank manager who sits in the bank and every morning he prays, Lord, please give me some foolish people who will take my credit card. When I send it to them, they haven't applied for it, but they will call this number, they will activate it, and they will get into debt, and I can begin to make money. Credit cards are dangerous. And you only own or use a card if you're disciplined. But the problem is you begin with good discipline. Within 6 months, you have become reckless about the way you use it. I have a credit card. I use it only when I travel out of the country. When I'm in the country, I give it to my wife and I tell her, keep it, hide it, and don't give it to me, even if I'm being sweet and, kind to you, bringing you flowers and chocolates. Don't give me the credit card. I can be very nice, by the way. But I don't use it locally because I know how dangerous they are. Let me explain. One of the things that has been found in research on credit cards is when you go to the shops with a credit card, Uchumi or Nakumat, you tend to spend 30% more when you're using a credit card than you would have spent if you're using cash. Because all you do is swipe. When you have to take the money out of your wallet and count the money and see how much money you have given, that's painful. But when you swipe, and nowadays they entice you with these, gold card. Me, I don't use these pink cards and these shower cards that are like adverts and etc. Mine is a gold card. So when I go to Chumi or somewhere and, I put my goods there, they're tallied up and the bill is shown, I then go into my wallet and I dig around and I pull it out and it's gold. And I sort of wave it around. Niwapi, where do I swipe it? And I'm hoping that everybody around me can see mine is a gold card. And then when it's swiped, it goes shwa, and the receipt is there. Some people, when they swipe, jaripu marangine, apana, apana. Mine is gold. When you swipe, it goes shwa, and it's out, okay? And before I put it back, I say, you saw, huh? I'm not here. Put it back. But do not be fooled, guys. You tend to purchase 30% more when you're using a card as compared with paying cash. And that's not all. By the way, this is why the tellers, Nakumat and all those other supermarkets, they don't charge you for using a credit card, even though they are charged up to 5% by the credit card company for the use of the card. They don't charge you, because they know they're also getting some of the extra cash that you've just spent. And they're happy to pay 5% to Visa or MasterCard because they got 30% more purchase when you use your card. But it doesn't end there. You remember when you signed your credit card agreement, in very fine, 1.5 font, okay? So small that you never saw it, it tells you that the interest on unpaid bills on your credit card is 3.5% per month. You saw the 3.5% and you said, that's okay, my mortgage is at 14.5%. What you did not see is that that is per month. There's a huge difference. My mortgage is at 14.5 per annum, per year. But my credit card is at 3.5% per month. Let me translate that for you. If you keep the card in debt and you pay 3.5% consolidated interest per month, the actual rate per year is called the APR, the annual percentage rate. My APR on my mortgage is 14.5% per annum. But my APR on my credit card at 3.5% per month, consolidated, okay, interest, is 51%. That's what you pay. And so if I charge my card to 100,000, okay, and I pay the minimum 10,000, 10%, every month I just pay 10%, it will take you 12 years to pay back that 100,000 because your annual interest rate is 51%. If the interest rate is not consolidated, it's no better. It's 42%. And so you are being bled dry. They are sucking blood from you. There is a manager somewhere who praises the Lord every morning that you are foolish enough that you are charging your card and you're not paying down your bill. The third thing that credit cards do for you is they always have there when the bill comes. The bill is 100,000, but minimum repayment is 10,000, 10%. And I kid you not again, guys, there is somebody praying that you will fall for the trick and only pay down 10% because it will take you 12 years to finish that bill. Credit cards are dangerous unless you are very, very clearly disciplined. And that's why the Bible says that the borrower is the slave of the lender. You don't want to fall into debt. Is there anything like good debt as opposed to bad debt? I suppose you can say yes, and some people would say yes. I actually say no. Debt is debt is debt. When you owe somebody else money, you need to pay back. It will give you stress, it will give you sleepless nights, and if something goes wrong, it can completely wipe you out. Whether it's supposedly good debt like mortgage debt, or it's bad debt like a car loan debt. Debt is debt is debt. In both cases, you are the slave of the lender. And so before you borrow, you need to ask yourself 10 questions. And this is what is called the tomorrow test. Okay, I can borrow today, but I need to ask these 10 questions to see whether I am ready to take on debt. The tomorrow test. I'm going to go through these quickly. I'll read them. You probably won't get them all, but we're going to put them up on the website so that you can go on our website and just download the 10 questions. Here they are. Question number 1. If my income is cut next year, or I lose my job, can I still afford to pay down this loan on schedule? That's the first question. And if the answer is no, you probably are not ready to take on that debt. You need to think about that. Number 2, can I wait for 30 days to see if my desire for this purchase will go away? Sometimes we're driven to purchase and go into debt. A new stereo system, a new iPhone, a new car. We're driven to go into debt for the wrong reasons. And maybe if we give it time, 30 days, to think about it, to pray about it, you realize I don't need to do this. And you save yourself from taking debt. And so the 30-day wait and whether the purchase or the desire will go. Number 3, am I making this decision based on a presumed hope of continued future income? And is it realistic? So I take a debt, okay, with some security like my home. And I presume that for the next 20 years, I'm going to be able to pay my mortgage. But what happens when I get into an accident, I am, hurt or wounded in a debilitating fashion, I cannot get a job, I cannot go back to work. how will I ever pay down this debt? Because I presumed that I would be in good health and able to earn a big income for the next 20 years when I took on this mortgage. And now I cannot. If you're there, then you need to pray that if you go into an accident, if you get into an accident, pray you die. Because when you die, you get at least the insurance, the life insurance, to pay off the debt. But if you don't die and you're just incapacitated and you become wounded, maybe paralyzed, then you cannot pay down that debt, and everything that you own will be swept away because you presumed on your salary for the next 20 years. And surely nobody can do that. So that's question number 3. Number 4, if I have to sell this asset, will I make enough to cover the remaining balance? And of course, you know about the economic downturn, recession that many in the US were caught in, where you have a house, you had presumed you'd be able to pay back on it, and the house prices fell, the ceiling, fell, and the prices went down, and the value of the house was only half what your mortgage was. And people walked away from their houses because they'd never be able to pay them back. Number 5, does this loan limit my financial, emotional, or spiritual freedom? Number 6, does the loan limit my ability to give generously, to change jobs, or to move in a new direction as God has called me to? There are many who would like to go into full-time ministry. They feel God is calling them into that, but they have so much debt, they cannot go anywhere until they finish paying their debt. And they cannot obey the Lord because the debt has become bondage. Number 7, does this debt hurt or help my testimony? Does it show a shining faith in God that I depend on Him to be my supplier, to watch over me, to meet my needs? Or does it hurt my testimony? Number 8, by taking this loan, am I forcing myself into depending on God or on man? Number 9, am I going around God's desire for my life, taking matters into my own hands, irrespective of what I sense God is saying? That I know God doesn't want me to purchase this house, but I want this house and I'm going to go and get a loan, come hook or by crook, I'm going to do it. And you are skirting around God's revealed will for you. And then number 10, am I willing to wait on God to provide in another way, or am I insisting on doing things my own way? That's what is called the tomorrow test. Before you take that loan, ask those questions. Now I know that there are those of you here who are in debt. And you can feel the burden. I'm not telling you anything new. You know the sleepless nights. There are conflicts in your marriage. And what you really want to hear is, help me. Tell me how to get out of this debt. So I want to give you 7 quick steps, okay? This advice you will find from anyone who understands the way that money works. So it's nothing new, but maybe just to remind you and call you to align yourself to these 7 steps so that you can get out of debt as quickly as possible. The first step is, when you're in a hole, stop digging. Don't get into more debt when you're already in debt. Take your credit card, if it is the cause of your debt, and cut it up and throw it away. Make sure that your salary goes into a joint account with a friend or your spouse so that you don't have easy access to the money and money cannot come out unless both of you can sign it off and are agreed on how it's going to be spent and are not getting into further debt. When you're in a hole, stop digging. Number 2 is build in accountability. Find somebody, talk to somebody, tell them what's going on, ask them to keep you accountable, ask them to walk with you. Every month, let them come and ask you, did you pay off your creditors? Did you remember this? And to walk with you the journey as you build up the discipline to pay down your debt. Doing it alone is hard. But when you have somebody to walk with you, then it's possible. If that somebody is your spouse, all the better. But if it's not, find somebody that you can be open and honest with. Thirdly, put a standing order for all your creditors. The easiest way to pay down debt is to deduct the amount before the money lands in your account or in your hands. You see, the government is clever. It takes your taxes before you get paid. And so you don't even think about taxes. But if you're a businessman and the money first comes to you, then you're always trying to cook up ways to con the government of its taxes. When the money is in your hands, it's so much more difficult to pay down your debtors. But if it's taken off before it comes to you, it's much easier. And you can go to your employer and tell him, could you please put half my salary into this account that is a repayment debt account for somebody I owe, and the other half into my account. If that's not possible, then put it into a joint account where there is accountability and you don't have access to it, but pay down your creditors. The Bible says in Proverbs chapter 37 and verse 21, evil people borrow and they never repay their debts, but the righteous give generously over time. And so pay down because you are the children of God. Number 4 is spend less money. The easiest place to find money is in your budget, your monthly budget. And what this means is don't shop at supermarkets because you're paying the rent for them on top of the purchase of what you're buying. Go directly to the manufacturers or to the wholesalers that the supermarkets buy from. When we were a young couple with my wife, one of the ways that we kept our food budget down, particularly meat, is we got together with 3 or 4 friends and we would go to the slaughterhouse and we would buy a cow and have it slaughtered, and then we would divide the meat into the number of families we were, and we could beat the market prices by almost half by cutting out the middleman. At one time, we were actually buying our meat from the Kenya Wildlife Services, because in the days when they used to allow us to eat game meat in the posh hotels like, Carnivore and such, when they cull the herds and they kill an antelope, they only take the back legs and, the front legs. The rest of the carcass, they wouldn't know what to do with it. And they would sell that meat at a throwaway price. And it was good meat. I've eaten eland and zebra and gazelle, and very good meat, very lean, very tasty. But we got clever and found a way. Do you know you can beat the price of inflation if you save up your money and in January buy all the soap you need for the year, all the toilet paper, all the cleaning, soaps you need, everything that is non-perishable, buy it in January, divide it into 12, and every month use 1/12. And by December, when you're finishing what you bought it at the price of January, and there is no upward creep of inflation. Get clever and reduce your expenditure so that you can save more aside. Next thing you do is sell stuff. Your homes are filled with too much stuff. Ladies, if you haven't worn that dress in 6 months, sell it. Give it away. You don't need it. You'll never fit in it again anyway. Okay? And the same with guys. Okay? Sell your stuff. Sell the car. Go by public transport. Downgrade, number 6, your lifestyle. Forget about wearing branded apparel. Give up the internet, the cable, TV. Stop buying the newspaper. Walk to work if possible. No restaurants, no salons, no gym. You can get perfect exercise running and jogging and walking. You don't need to pay gym fees. And after all, for the ladies, you can do rastas. They actually look quite good. Saves you a ton of money. A ton of money. Okay, number 7. List all your debts, starting with the highest interest debt, or even with the smallest one. You sit down, you write, these are the 10 people I owe money. I owe money to my bank, I owe money to that SACCO, I owe money to my place of work. Write it down. Alongside that, write down the interest to each of those. My bank is 14.5%, my SACCO is probably 7%, etc., etc. Write it down. And then write down when you expect to finish paying that debt. Okay? If you follow whatever debt plan you're using. And you do one of two things. Number 1 is you pay down the debt that has the highest interest first. If you have credit card debt, get rid of that at an APR of 51%. It is nuts. You will never be able to pay that down if you keep that debt going. So pay down as your primary purpose to begin with. Or even restructure your debt. Go to your bank. I owe my credit card company 100,000. Go and borrow that 100,000 from the bank, and the interest is 14.5%. Go and pay your credit card company and then work at paying your bank. But you cannot keep high interest like 51%. Restructure your loan. So take the highest interest and start paying it down. When you finish that first one, then you take the money you are paying for your credit card and put it into the next highest interest and pay that down quicker, because now you're using 2 sets of monies. And then take the 2 that you paid down and go to the third one and pay that down. That's one way to do it. The second way to do it is to begin with the smallest loan. The smaller the loan, the more likely that the emotional cost of that debt is high, because it's your brother or it's your auntie or your mother, and while they don't charge you interest, every time you meet, there is a sense of dissatisfaction at the fact that you owe money that you're not paying. And so the emotional cost is high. And it's just a little money, you can pay it down quickly. Start with that one, and then roll to the next one and pay that off. And then roll the 2 into the third one. This is what is called the snowball repayment method. You can go on the web, you can read up on it. It's very simple, but it works. And it gives you progress. And in 5 years, you will be able to pay down a lot of your debt. When I discovered that my interest on my home had gone up to 24%, I really cried out to the Lord and asked the Lord, please help me. I want, even though I have another 5 to 7 years to pay down this debt, Lord, by faith, by a miracle, I want to pay it down in less than 2 years. And I had no idea how that would happen. But one day, we were in a conversation with our pension provider. And they told us something that awoke me. They told us that before the age of 50, when you switch jobs, then you can only take your personal contribution into your pension out of the pension. You know what I'm talking about? When you switch jobs, then you're allowed to take part of your pension, but only your portion, not what your employer put in for you, okay? But when you turn 50 years, they allow you to take the full amount out, but you have to pay taxes to the government, about 20% taxes on your pension. But if you wait until you are 65 years old, then you get the whole pension with no tax on it. And as I sat down and thought about my 24% interest mortgage rate against the 8% that my pension manager gives me when the inflation is at 11%, I decided to cash in my pension, pay down my mortgage, be debt-free, and never go back into debt. And so now I'm debt-free, guys. I own my home. I tell you not, my relationship with my wife is good. We have no issues. And I sleep at night. You need to live in that space where you do not have debt. You are debt-free and you owe no man anything. If you owe debt, you are on a down escalator towards poverty. Unless you pay it off and you can get back to making your money work for you instead of working for the bank. God bless you. Let's stand up to our feet. Pray together. Father, we want to pray that these lessons that we're learning would be lessons that we live. It's not good enough that we just hear them. We need help. And we're asking that you would give us wisdom to know what to do. Send us relief. Put us back on the up escalator. Help us to be good stewards of the resources and the wealth that you already give us, whether it's our salary or our businesses or whatever. And may it be that we would be even more generous because we have seen the blessings of the Lord. And as we go into our week, we ask that you would go with us. As we engage in our engagements, be they work or be they studies, Father, would you help us to be a shining witness for you wherever we are, in every conversation. And we ask this in Jesus' precious name. Amen.